Today we are tackling a figure who is so iconic, he's almost a myth. We're talking about Steve Jobs. He's been called a genius, a visionary, a tyrant even. But what if all those labels miss the point? What if his ability to literally will the future into existence wasn't magic, but a replicable, though extreme, psychological system? Hi and welcome back to How You Win, the channel where we decode the mental operating systems of the people who change the world. Today we're going to use the core principles from my upcoming book, Master Your Lifescript, to dissect the engine behind Steve Jobs' success. We'll go beyond the myth to give you a practical framework for his brand of world-changing innovation. So let's get into it. To understand Steve Jobs, you have to start with his most legendary and misunderstood trait, the reality distortion field. People who worked with him said he had an almost supernatural ability to convince them that their impossible engineering problems were in fact possible.
We'll do the $90,000 investment at a $300,000 valuation, but I also want you to kick in a $250,000 credit line with 10% interest to be paid back in full once we meet net revenue positive.
Okay. What I mean is okay.
This wasn't magic. This was a powerful application of a principle from my book distinguishing between two types of laws. This is the ability to see the difference between unchangeable natural laws like physics and changeable man-made rules, which are just limitations and other people's timelines and beliefs. Now, Jobs lived his life refusing to accept man-made rules. Walter Isaacson's biography tells the perfect story. During the development of the first Macintosh, an engineer told Jobs it was impossible to make the computer boot up as fast as he wanted. Now, Jobs stared at him and asked if it would save a person's life, could you find a way to shave 10 seconds off? Now, the engineer thought about it, he reframed it and admitted, well, he probably could. Jobs then showed him that if 5 million people wasted an extra 10 seconds every day booting up their computers, it would add up to over 100 lifetimes worth of human hours saved per year. Now the engineer went back and made the machine boot faster. This is the reality distortion field in action. It's not about changing physics. It's about fundamentally rejecting the man-made rules of what we believe is possible and forcing a return to the first principles of what can actually be done. Now, this obsessive drive leads us to the second principle, which explains why he cared so much about details like boot up times. It's the goal pyramid. As I explain in my book, our goals exist on 3 levels. Our daily behaviors at the bottom, our measurable outcomes in the middle, and our role or identity at the top. Now, Steve Jobs' identity goal was incredibly clear and powerful. As he stated many times, his mission was to stand at the intersection of technology and the liberal arts.
It's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. That it's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the result that makes our hearts sing.
He wasn't just building machines, he was building tools for the mind that were beautiful, that were elegant and intuitive. This top-level identity drove everything. It explains his obsession with calligraphy, which he famously audited at Reed College after dropping out. At the time, it was seemingly useless behavior, but 10 years later, that knowledge of typography became the soul of the Macintosh and the key reason, one of the key reasons, it felt so different. It explains why he obsessed over the curve of a corner or the click of a button. These weren't random quirks. They were the necessary behavioral goals to achieve his outcome goals of creating an elegant product, which in turn then served his ultimate identity goal of merging art and technology. When your daily actions are connected to an identity that powerful, it creates a relentless clarifying focus. But what happens when the script of your life is violently rewritten by others? Now this brings us to our final principle and the story of Jobs' ultimate comeback. It's rewriting your co-authored script. Now in 1985, Steve Jobs was publicly and brutally fired from Apple, the company he had poured his life into. Board, his co-authors wrote a chapter for him that said, "You're out, you're done, you're a failure." This is a moment that would trigger permanent learned helplessness in almost anyone. It could have been the end of his story, except for it wasn't. In his legendary 2005 Stanford commencement speech, he explained his mindset. He said, "I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me."
And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again.
He was actively reframing the narrative. He didn't see the failure as a verdict on his identity, but as a painful, necessary plot point. He then took agency and responsibility. He didn't retreat, he went out and founded Next and acquired Pixar.
During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world.
Now this wasn't just a rebound, this was where he learned new skills in software and its storytelling. This was the chapter where he built new islands of competence to reach new horizons across the ocean of possibilities. When he returned to a nearly bankrupt Apple in 1997, he wasn't the same person who had been fired. He came back with the wisdom from his time in exile and used it to write one of the greatest second acts in history.
Steve Jobs.
Launching the iMac, the iPod, and eventually the iPhone. He took the pen back and rewrote his ending. So when we look at Steve Jobs through the lens of Master Your Lifescript, we see a clear and powerful system. First, he used his reality distortion field to distinguish between laws, rejecting man-made limits. Second, he was driven by a powerful goal pyramid, connecting his obsession with details to a grand identity. And third, he rewrote his own script, transforming his greatest public failure into a catalyst for his ultimate success. Now this is a powerful blueprint for anyone who wants to make a dent in the universe. It proves that your reality is more negotiable than you think. Success is learnable. So ask yourself, what man-made rule in your life or in your industry have you been treating as an unchangeable law of nature? And what would happen if you decided to question it? I describe the complete system, all the principles and frameworks to start authoring your own reality in my new upcoming book, Master Your Lifescript. If you want to be the first to know when it launches and get exclusive pre-order bonuses, join the waitlist at the link in the description. Now, what do you think is the most misunderstood part of Steve Jobs' story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out when we take another deep dive into how you win. Thanks for watching.